to the Ministry of Gray, where we break free from black and white thinking and uncover the truth somewhere in the middle. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Satan's Little Side Piece, and you are tuned in to episode 9 of the Ministry of Gray podcast, where I question everything from your favorite influencer's latest grift to the so called truths you've been spoon fed since birth. Today, we're going to sink our teeth into something really juicy, and that is belief deconstruction and why tearing down old faith isn't just for philosophy majors and ex-seminarians. And don't worry, you're not going to need to be a Phil bro or to have spent 7 years in a smoky coffee shop throwing around niche to get this. We're also going to tackle some St. Patrick's Day. Yes, that holiday you only remember because you wore a green t-shirt and posted a picture of yourself with a pint of Guinness. And just a little spoiler, it's a lot darker than just shamrocks and Kiss Me I'm Irish t-shirts. I'm also going to be covering some interesting headlines from this week that are maybe semi-hypocritical and somewhat enraging and maybe even a bit eye-rolling. And of course, you aren't going to want to miss that. And I'm going to also round out this episode with some important safety tips for deconstructing your faith while surrounded by Bible-thumping Aunt Karens and Uncle Ronnies. We're heading quickly into Easter season when there's a lot of talking about the sacrifice of God with his son Jesus, and just a lot of altar calls are going to be happening. And I think it's essential that you have this part of your deconversion process under control. I really feel it's essential. I might even say God sent. Ha ha. So, with this little rundown out of the way, go grab your favorite drink of communion wine and a side of wafers, and let's get into this episode. All right, so today we are going to start off looking into why you don't need to be a philosophy bro to deconstruct your beliefs. If you're thinking that this deconstruction means you've got to be knee deep in philosophical jargon, parsing through Kantian epistemology like some, I don't know, pseudo intellectual in a turtleneck, you're wrong. You don't have to be a philosophy bro to start tearing down the shaky foundations of your beliefs. And frankly, if that's the bar you're setting for yourself, you're already letting your mental prison hold the keys to your freedom. See, the big problem with modern deconstructionism, in my opinion, is there's this toxic idea that unless you can quote Foucault or Derrida, you're just some amateur dabbling in the shallow end of the pool. So I want to get one thing very straight. Philosophical elitism and the intellectual purgatory of I need to understand every counter argument. This is often the death knell for real progress in your deconstruction journey. But again, this is not your fault. The world loves to make you feel like you're missing some essential piece of the puzzle if you can't talk about logical positivism over beers at a bar. But you don't need a PhD in philosophy to break free from your programming. So before I get into the complex arguments that these guys love to get wrapped up in, I think it's important to understand what's the deal with these Phil bros anyway. See, they're the ones who are going to corner you in the middle of an argument with a dense, labyrinthian series of arguments about appeasimistic justification. And this whole time, you're probably just wondering if someone could open up a window, right? There's so much hot air just blowing. They're going to throw out terms like solipsism, the idea that, only your mind exists. Or they could start rambling on about ontological arguments for God's existence, like, they're trying to land a guest spot on Jeopardy! Meanwhile, you're sitting there wondering if you've accidentally wandered into an intro to philosophy class, and you're probably, at this point, really regretting having even walked into this conversation. Okay, so let me break this down. I think one of the biggest pitfalls of these endless philosophical debates is that they remove you from the core question, the question of why you believe what you do in the first place. Instead of actually reflecting on your own personal experience, you're getting swept up in abstract arguments that won't even move the needle on your belief journey. Take the problem of evil. This is a great example. It's classic. You're going to have some guy try to explain that the presence of evil in the world is perfectly compatible with an all-powerful, all-good God because we have, quote unquote, free will to choose good or evil. Sounds legit, right? But let's be real about this. This doesn't help you process the pain, suffering, and hypocrisy you're seeing with your own two eyes. It just serves as a mental gymnastic trick to keep you locked in a box of faith. But look at the ontological argument for God's existence. I really shouldn't even get started on this one, but we all know the argument. If you can imagine a perfect God, then that God must exist because perfection includes existence. It's a nice theory, but who exactly gets to define perfection? Oh, right, the guy who's already assumed that God is the answer to everything. These philosophical debates often get trapped in circular reasoning, where the conclusion is already built into the premises. It's a logic loop that literally gets you nowhere. And I think that's the thing. Rational argumentation is great, and you should totally engage with it. But these Phil bros aren't really interested in getting to the heart of your lived experience. They're interested in proving their own intellectual superiority, and in the process, they'll happily drown you in more questions than you could ever hope to answer, distracting you from the core truths you're just trying to reckon with on your own anyway. Now, I want to also talk about why all this intellectual jujitsu matters when it comes to the real work of belief deconstruction. One of the reasons we get stuck in this intellectual hamster wheel, I like to call it, is because something called cognitive dissonance. Now, you've probably heard of it before. It's the psychological tension we feel when we hold two conflicting ideas or beliefs at once. You know this feeling. You're told one thing, but you feel something else entirely. And that tension can be unbearable. And what do? We double down on the belief that makes us uncomfortable, no matter how illogical or inconsistent it is. And let me give you a classic example. Let's say you grew up in a conservative religious environment where you were taught that the world was created in 7 days, young Earth theory. Now, as an adult, you've learned about evolution, fossil records, and the age of the Earth. These pieces of information directly contradict what you were taught. Enter cognitive dissonance. You either accept the new information and change your belief, or you reject it and find a way to rationalize the discrepancy. This is when people start pulling out pseudoscientific arguments like, well, maybe God just used evolution as his method to explain away the contradictions. Or like my mom did when it came to explaining to me why there were dinosaur bones. She literally told me that the devil planted them all around the earth to confuse us, to distract us. And she was a first grade teacher in a public school for 30 fucking years. This whole behavior, it's like trying to patch a hole in a leaky boat with spiritual duct tape. You know, it doesn't fix the problem, but it's easier than admitting the boat might be sinking. And this is then where compartmentalization comes into play. We start to separate the conflicting ideas into these neat little boxes in our brain. You have one that'll be labeled my religious life and the other labeled my scientific life. But those boxes don't help us make sense of the big picture, do they? They just let us go on pretending that all the contradictions in our thinking don't matter as long as we don't open those boxes at the same time. It's like living with a mental split personality where one part of you saying, I'm all about the truth, while the other part's just saying, I'm going to ignore the truth that makes me uncomfortable and stick with what I know. This is why people love to hide behind intellectual frameworks like philosophy, theology, or even emotionally loaded arguments, because it gives them a shield against confronting their internal conflicts. I think it's easier to quote St. Augustine or Immanuel Kant than it is to say, wow, I've been living a lie for most of my life and I don't know how to deal with it. So, what does all this mean? And I think this is where my main point is. You don't need to be a philosophy bro to recognize when your beliefs are being held up by intellectual smoke and mirrors. You don't need to recite Descartes to see that there's a disconnect between your beliefs and the world around you. The key to deconstruction isn't in memorizing endless philosophical arguments, guys, or filling your head with even more abstract noise that you already are struggling with. It's about recognizing the core emotional and psychological dissonance that's keeping you locked in a cage. You're already equipped with the tools you need, your experiences, your doubts, that feeling of discomfort when you're trying to make sense of things that just don't add up anymore. You don't need anyone's permission to feel that cognitive dissonance, and you certainly do not need to drown in convoluted philosophical arguments just to make sense of it. Deconstruction isn't a journey to intellectual perfection. It's a journey to personal honesty. So stop trying to justify your doubts with the right intellectual framework. And don't let the academic gatekeepers make you feel small. Ask the tough questions, sit with discomfort, let go of the need for validation. It's your life, your beliefs, and your personal path to freedom and enlightenment. Hey, listeners! Satan's little side piece here. I really hope you're enjoying the show so far, and if you're loving what you hear, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay updated with all of my episodes. Your support really helps me grow and reach more people like yourself. And guess what? There's even more for you over on my website, mogpodcast.com. That's MOGpodcast.com. Please check it out. Get the scoop on upcoming episodes, exciting guests, and all the ways you can support this podcast. Thanks for being part of the MOG Cast family. So here we are celebrating St. Patrick, the man who allegedly brought Christianity to Ireland. And I mean, what's not to love about that, right? Just picture it. This guy, a missionary armed with nothing but, what, guilt and a book written by a bunch of desert-dwelling goat herders. And he's like, hey, those gods you've been worshiping for centuries, yeah, those are nonsense. You know what would really help? A whole new set of saints and a god, but this time, we're going to want you to feel guilty all the damn time. That's right. Forget your rich spiritual traditions and the God you actually understood and could connect with. Nah, we're going to bring in the God of guilt, shame, and eternal damnation because what's not to love about martyrdom? But if we're going to talk about the good that came with the Catholic Church's arrival, because let's face it, they always bring the good stuff, child abuse, forced conformity, and a whole bunch of misogyny. Nothing says civilization quite like that. But hey, they did bring some literacy, right? Or at least they brought their version of literacy. You know, they taught the Irish how to read so they could better understand the church's rules and the forgiveness paperwork. You didn't get to read for fun. Oh, no, no. You read to repent and ask for forgiveness for every single bad thought, every misstep, every time you looked at someone's wife for just a second too long. Isn't it just the best? Nothing quite as liberating as an organized, state-sponsored mindfuck. Now, let's not forget those churches he built. I'm sure every Irish person back then was thrilled to have to enter a dark, dank structure where their souls would be sold to the highest bidder. St. Patrick, building more walls to lock people in, not out. Sure, you could find some people who were grateful for sanctuary from their existential dread, but I have a feeling most of them weren't so jazzed about the idea of eternal torment just for thinking about things a little too hard. St. Patrick's mission to Ireland, according to history books written by people who conveniently skipped over the whole what the church actually did to people part, was a beacon of light. I think in reality it was more like the beginning of hundreds of years of child abuse, forced conversions, and a whole hell of a lot of hypocrisy that's still with us today. But, just keep pretending this is a good thing because, well, that's what good people do. They turn a blind eye to centuries of abuse and paint it with a nice coat of Christian charity. Of course, we have to look at the bad, the force behind the good. And St. Patrick's good isn't so much good as it is violent imperialism dressed in a holy robe. Forget the whole he peacefully spread Christianity narrative. He wasn't handing out pamphlets and offering cups of tea. He was smashing sacred Irish sites with the force of Rome behind him, demanding conversions or else. Patrick didn't ask the Irish to join Christianity. He obliterated Druidic centers, burned their texts, and he wiped out pagan holy sites. St. Patrick's job wasn't just spreading religion. It was to subjugate, erase, and replace. Places like the Hill of Uisneach, once a spiritual center for the Celts, were crushed under the boot of Christianity's imperial agenda. He didn't spread enlightenment. He spread control and domination. This campaign of violence was met with significant resistance. The people fought back, and they were slaughtered. The Irish weren't some naive bunch of converts waiting for the light. Christianity was forced at the point of a sword. Pagan festivals like Beltane and Samhain were wiped out, with entire villages destroyed for refusing to abandon their gods. In 635 AD, St. Columbanus, another missionary, was part of this violent Christian wave, targeting and defeating any resistance with the full support of the church's military arm. And think about this ugly reality. St. Patrick didn't act alone. The Catholic Church was a well-oiled machine of violence and cultural erasure at this point in history. Anyone who resisted was labeled a heretic and executed, often publicly. Ireland wasn't converted. It was subjugated. If you resisted, your family was killed, your traditions erased, and your gods crushed. It was cultural genocide, pure and simple. And what's the aftermath? Centuries of Irish people cut off from their roots. The Irish language was suppressed. Pagan traditions were erased from the record. People were ripped away from their ancestral beliefs, forced to worship a god that wasn't theirs. And anyone who tried to hold on to the old ways paid the price, often in blood. Of course, then there's the ugly. And I think we need to cut to the crap here. There's a reason St. Patrick's Day is the most bullshitted about holiday on the planet, and it has nothing to do with four-leaf clovers or some magical leprechaun riding a unicorn. The fact is, St. Patrick has been sanitized, hollowed out, and repackaged so many times, you'd think the guy was a saint instead of a religious bulldozer. So let's talk about this biggest pile of bullshit myths surrounding St. Patrick and the whole damn holiday itself. Let's get this out of the way right now, first and foremost. No, St. Patrick did not drive the snakes out of Ireland. Snakes, I mean, really, come on. You think the Irish were living in the middle of some biblical snake plague? The dude was not some kind of herpetological exterminator on a mission from God. Ireland never had snakes to begin with. It's an island. We're talking about an ecological reality here, not a myth. The thing about snakes, it's symbolic. Patrick didn't chase snakes out of Ireland. He was symbolically chasing paganism out. He was the religious equivalent of the guy who goes into a neighborhood, takes a wrecking ball to the local culture, and then claims, "Look, I've saved you." No. Patrick, you didn't save shit. You just bulldozed the rich, ancient traditions of a people who lived there for thousands of years. And even worse, for centuries, the snake myth was sold to the masses as fact. And of course we know why, because it's easier to sell a magical narrative than to explain the messy, violent truth. Snakes are an easy metaphor. Hell, they've been the bad guys in every damn myth since the Garden of Eden. The Irish, they're just part of the same screwy tale where a guy comes to a land, burns everything that's not his, and then somehow turns out to be a hero. He's like the biblical equivalent of a colonizer who patted himself on the back for wiping out a culture. So yeah, there weren't any snakes. Just the guy who took a machete to anything he didn't like and got turned into a goddamn legend for it. Nice work, Rome. And the shamrock. Let's think about this great symbol of Ireland and St. Patrick, right? This little green plant that's been jammed in every parade float on every goddamn pub sign from here to the ends of the earth. You've been told that St. Patrick used the shamrock to explain the Trinity. You know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, blah, blah, blah. He took a clover and said, "Hey guys, here's a really clever metaphor for a 3-in-1 thing," which, by the way, is utter horse shit. It's a clover, not a theological lesson. And let's think this through. What's more likely? St. Patrick, who murdered, converted, and erased ancient traditions, sat around under a tree going, "Oh, hey, I think I'll use this to teach a complex theological concept to a bunch of people who probably don't even have a written language." Or, and hear me out on this one, he just picked up a local plant that was already around, slapped some metaphorical baggage on it, and called it a tool of enlightenment. The shamrock was a pagan symbol long before St. Patrick came along, so it's pretty rich to repackage that as divine inspiration. Again, though, you've got marketing magic at work here. The whole idea of St. Patrick teaching about the Trinity with the shamrock is revisionist bullshit, designed to sell the idea that Christianity was this logical, smooth transition. But no, it wasn't. It was a forced conversion. And they just slapped a fake feel-good story on top of it to make it look like everyone was on board. Clearly, St. Patrick's Day isn't just a commercialized circus of green beer, shamrocks, and leprechauns. It's the absurd spectacle of a nation pretending to celebrate the very thing that enslaved and oppressed its ancestors. You gotta ask yourself, how did this piece of Roman imperialism and Christian violence turn into the most widely recognized holiday of the Irish? And I guess we've got to start with the dose of reality. St. Patrick, the supposed good Christian missionary, wasn't a hero to the Irish people. As we have clearly figured out, he's an agent of a brutal foreign power that systematically stripped Irish culture. So, how the hell do we get from cultural genocide to pub crawls, right? And it starts with whitewashing history. Over time, as the Catholic Church spread throughout Europe, it needed to rewrite narratives to make its violent past more palatable. The truth of Patrick's conquest was buried, and a new, shiny mythology was created. Instead of focusing on the mass executions, the suppression of indigenous beliefs, or the violent conversion tactics, history rebranded him as a saint who brought light to the dark, superstitious masses in Ireland. Of course, they used a sanitized version of his good deeds and conveniently omitted the hundreds of thousands of Irish lives lost in the wake of his forceful campaign of brutality. Instead of resistance, the Irish were depicted as grateful converts, quietly embracing a God they never asked for. And let's not forget the unbelievable irony. The very celebration of the conversion becomes the epitome of fun and carefree. It's ironic on steroids that the Irish themselves, who were violently converted, are now supposed to sit back and toast their oppressor. This is truly an Orwellian rewrite where brutality becomes benevolence and oppression becomes a fucking parade. Of course, you have to also look at the modern celebration of St. Patrick's Day in its most grotesque form. This holiday is a capitalist cash grab masquerading as cultural pride. What began as a tribute to an imperial conqueror has been turned into a Disney-fied cash cow of a holiday. You're encouraged to wear a plastic green hat, eat corned beef, and get mindlessly drunk, all while forgetting the ugly history behind it. And why? Again, it's easier to forget the centuries of oppression and violence and focus on selling shamrock-themed everything. Retailers, bars, and restaurants, they all cash in on the holiday while the deeper history is swept under the rug like a dirty secret no one wants to confront. I mean, hell, why would you want to dive into the complexities of cultural genocide when you can sell a $5 pint of Guinness and slap on a Kiss Me I'm Irish sticker? That's the ugly truth behind this day, the commodification of trauma. Irish suffering has become an easy way to make a profit, and for a lot of people, that's just easier than confronting the real past. But if we take this even deeper, the rebranding of St. Patrick wasn't just a convenient rewrite. It was a strategic reinvention after centuries of brutal colonialism. The Catholic Church really needed to soften its image. The story of a man who violently destroyed indigenous Irish culture had to be twisted into the narrative of a saintly figure who peacefully converted the Irish from their primitive ways. This reinvention was key to the Church's wider agenda of spreading its empire across Europe and beyond. It's much easier to ignore centuries of violence when you can package it into a feel good saintly story that fits neatly into modern day patriotism and national identity. And I mean, we have to be honest, Ireland bought into this. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Irish immigrants in America, looking for a sense of identity and belonging, seized on this image of the shamrock waving saint as a way to claim pride in their roots. Even though Irish people were suffering under British rule, they clung to the mythology that they were descendants of the civilized Christian missionaries, rather than being brutalized subjects of a foreign invasion. And now, of course, St. Patrick's Day isn't even about honoring Irish history. It's about slapping a $5 price tag on your green dyed natty light and turning the whole thing into a commercial clusterfuck. It's amazing how we can turn a sacred day of cultural genocide into a marketing orgy. But don't think this is just about selling booze. I mean, it's about selling ignorance. Forget history. Here, have a t-shirt with a shamrock and a leprechaun. Forget the oppression. Have a shamrock-shaped cookie and a fluorescent green drink that tastes like regret. And oh, by the way, make sure to completely forget the fact that this whole celebration is built on rape. Yeah, we took the atrocities and turned them into parades, beer commercials, and an excuse to be drunk in public. Because who wants to face the ugly truth when you can just party instead? It's your favorite time of the broadcast. It is time for our Holy Hypocrisy Roundup. And today I have quite a few headlines that'll maybe make you wonder what the hell, America, and help you along your deconversion journey and maybe how you view politics and religion. I think we're going to first get things started with the headline Fate of Nations First Religious Charter School in the Supreme Court. And I got to say that nothing says freedom of education like a religious charter school. It's like paying for your kids' private schooling with your tax dollars so that they can like learn that science is for suckers and dinosaurs were just God's backup plan for that whole 6-day creation gig. I mean, seriously, welcome to the future where public education is turning into a school of indoctrination cleverly disguised as choice. I mean, we're going to literally be funding a playground for religious zealotry where our kids are going to graduate with a PhD in blind faith and zero critical thinking skills. And I think the real juicy bit is the precedent this sets for an entire system of taxpayer funded dogma. I mean, what's next? A charter school that teaches the flat earth theory but with academic rigor? I mean, what are we going to tell the world? Welcome to America, where we're just a bigger mess of freedom of exploitation? Because apparently, taxpayer money is meant to fund the next generation of zealots who are going to defend their faith with the same fervor they've been taught to distrust science. Another article I came across Christian college launches pulpit simulator to train pastors in better preaching. And as a person who loves tech, I thought this was kind of interesting and funny at the same time. And apparently now, to be a preacher, you got to be able to successfully simulate the experience. I mean, seriously, forget years of experience or a genuine connection with your congregation. Because now you've got a pulpit simulator. It's like the church version of Flight Simulator, but instead of a cockpit, it's all about selling the gospel to a bunch of avatars. I mean, seriously, nothing says spiritual authenticity like practicing your sermons in a digital world that's about as lifelike as your grandma's Facebook profile picture. What's next? A virtual prayer circle? Maybe a Soul Redeemer VR? Just throw a headset on and boom, salvation in 2 hours or less? What's even more delicious here is the commercialization of salvation. Preaching, just a marketing tool now. You want your preacher to be effective? No problem. Just load up the pulpit simulator and turn that sermon into a TED Talk. Because authenticity is so overrated. You want to speak to the soul? Nah, speak to the algorithm. Now, faith isn't about genuine moments of reflection. It's about market share, brand expansion, and an avatar's approval rating. Really, really interesting to me, this whole concept and how technology is even pervading religious spaces. It's just mind-boggling. But, of course, with all of the amazing technology out there, unfortunately, there's going to be some bad that comes with it. Take, for instance, this former megachurch pastor, Robert Morris, that was recently indicted on child sex abuse charges. And I know, a megachurch scandal, I mean, predictable as the sun rising in the east, right? But yeah, another pastor of a massive megachurch has been caught, and Robert Morris is on the hook for child sex abuse. And this is just another in a long line of hypocrites who have built their empire on morality, purity, and the whole Jesus loves you, but I'll screw you over in the name of God thing. And I don't know if it's comedy or irony, but the same institution that's preaching all about purity and forgiveness, they're burying these scandals under a mountain of prayer and donations. How's that for moral clarity? And if we really get into this situation, this is really not just about a single bad apple. This is a whole rotten orchard of power-hungry preachers whose business model revolves around turning faith into a corporation. You can't even be shocked anymore. I know I'm not. And then the real fun begins when these places, with their luxury jets, swimming pools, and exorbitant salaries, they stand there just going on and on and on about morality. And meanwhile, they're covering up sexual abuse issues like this. They're robbing people blind through embezzlement. And they're pretending that they're not just running a cult with a better PR team. At this point, I think accountability is as mythical as the money they've swindled from their congregants. Lastly, I want to talk about the Burma scholarship cut by the Trump administration. I think this is a real beautiful FAFO moment. And really, this is a real fuck around and find out, because imagine you're a Burmese student who just managed to escape a war-torn country, okay? You clawed your way into a scholarship program funded by USAID to get an education. And now, just as you're getting a taste of hope, the Trump administration decides to cut off your funding because, surprise, surprise, it doesn't align with their national interests. Yeah. Giving refugees from a military junta the chance to learn and build their country's future, that is not in line with America. This is the stuff of nightmares. The program that was literally giving young people a shot at rebuilding their country is just poof, gone. Talk about FAFO indeed. But here's where I think the irony starts smacking you like in the face, like a toddler with a sledgehammer. The decision to pull the plug on this program by this administration, this pro-Christian administration of all people, is so cynical. I can't help but laugh, because the scholarships, yes, they were about helping marginalized people, but most of them were Christian to begin with. And that's going to wrap up this particular little slew of headlines for the week. And hopefully next week it'll be something a little more amusing and a lot less tragic. Quick reminder, folks, if you're finding value in today's episode, take a moment to hit that like button, share it with a friend, subscribe wherever you're tuning in. Also, please don't miss out on all the extras I have waiting for you on my website, mogpodcast.com. That's mogpodcast.com. From behind-the-scenes content to ways you can support or work with us, it's all there. Plus, you'll get a sneak peek at future episodes and special guests. Thanks for being here. I could not do this without you. Welcome back from that short break. If you've been breathing for any amount of time, you'll know what I'm talking about next. With the warmer weather creeping in and almost all of the religious holidays behind us, we just still have to get through, Lent and Easter. It seems like the zealots are back in full swing. And guess what? So's the pressure to get in line, bend the knee, and believe in whatever magical nonsense your family's selling. You've felt it. I've felt it in the past, that pressure. The weird family love mixed with guilt trips, judgment, and passive aggressive prayers that sound more like threats. So let's talk about how to deal with it before Aunt Karen tries to save your soul at Easter Sunday breakfast. And I think what I'm going to be explaining over this next segment, it should be mandatory for every atheist, agnostic, and non believer out there. And that's the safety plan. Because believe it or not everyone gets to live their life free of the constant, sometimes hostile reminder that their lack of belief isn't just inconvenient, it's a threat to the peace of the world. So I'm going to break this down for you. First and foremost, I need to start with the basics. For some atheists, and for those just deconstructing or who are on the fence, coming out of the non believer closet isn't just a cathartic experience. It's like handing a grenade to your relatives and saying, try not to blow yourselves up. And I'm being serious. This is not a joke. Some folks can handle the inevitable fallout, others not so much. And during this time of year, when we have the Easter sermons going on, the religious zealots, they're not just going to pack up and go away once it's over. In fact, they're going to be motivated. They're going to be fired up. They'll find a way to remind you that your skepticism is a phase or that you're a lost soul, possibly with a side of demon possession, depending on where you're at. This is the season where your non belief is like a flashing neon sign that says, hey, let's test how much emotional trauma you can handle before you cave. And for a lot of us out here, the holidays are always a grim reminder that our personal beliefs, or, lack thereof, don't exactly mesh with society's expectations. So you got two choices. You can keep pretending or start planning your escape. And trust me, the escape plan is a lot healthier. And before I go into elements you should have in your plan, I want to give you a few examples of why these safety plans are necessary. And feel free to raise your hand or clap hell yeah when if you any of these stories sound familiar, all right? And these are actual stories that were told to me over the years that I still cannot forget. A college student about a decade ago came out as an atheist to her mom. Classic move. Hey mom, no gods for me. It's college, you feel empowered. But can you imagine what she got in return? A few tears, maybe some shouting? No. Her mom literally hit her with the old you're possessed by demons thing and just cut off her college funding. Suddenly, this young woman is faced with a choice: abandon her beliefs or lose her education. This isn't just emotional manipulation, it's financial warfare, people. And this is the kind of pressure that can ruin your future. Another story I remember is from a young guy out of Nebraska. He'd been keeping his atheism on the down low for as long as possible, which was a really smart move considering his family. But eventually, his uncle figured it out, and he didn't just get a disappointed look. No, he rounded up 20 of his church buddies for a full-blown intervention. I mean, picture this: 20 people praying over you, chanting like it's the end of the world, trying to save your soul. Now, this, my friends, is what I call a violation of not just personal space, but personal freedom. You might not be physically restrained, but when they lock you in a room and tell you your soul's going to hell unless you bend to their will, that's forceful coercion, pure and simple. And I think that's the thing. We really need to understand what is abuse. And I'm not just talking about your aunt trying to convert you by sending you Bible verses in a text every Tuesday morning. I'm talking about much, much deeper actions and behavior. Spiritual abuse. I think if you've ever had someone try to control or manipulate you using religion as their weapon of choice, you know what I'm talking about. This isn't a casual come to church with me invite. This is more along the lines of if you don't believe you're going to burn forever type of deal. It's control dressed up in a Sunday hat. Then you have emotional abuse, which kind of falls under the top one as well. This happens when someone tells you things like you're broken or sinful because you don't share their faith. They're actively trying to break you down. It's not even about saving you. It's about making you feel like dirt because you don't subscribe to their belief system. I think a classic is the whole "you're going to hell." Like, sure, grandma, sure. Then you have the financial abuse, kind of like the college friend of mine I mentioned up above earlier. When families or communities are using money to make you conform, this is obviously it's more than just unfair. It's a power play. You think you can just exist without playing their game. And you may feel confident about that at first, but financial manipulation is probably one of the most common ways to force compliance. I think families do this all the time, not just about faith, but about career choices, about the people that we want to have relationships with, all types of decisions we want to make in life. Really controlling parents, they're going to play the money game against you. Then you have physical coercion. And don't think for a second that this doesn't happen. When someone physically restrains you, whether that's keeping you locked in a room, forcing you into hours of prayer, or God forbid, exorcism rituals, it's nothing short of abuse. I don't care if they're holding a Bible while they're doing it, it's abuse. And of course, we have the good old verbal abuse and public humiliation tactic. Classic. When they drag you out in front of everyone and parade you as the lost soul, it's not just awkward, guys. Recognize this for the abuse that it is. It's designed to isolate you, make you feel like less of a person, and paint you as the problem in every family narrative. And you're probably thinking, yeah, I've experienced this or that, or you may be wondering, how are you even going to deal with this? And that part of that is to get smart and to have a safety plan. Whether you're a fully grown adult or a minor still stuck under the thumb of people who think faith is a valid substitute for logic, you need a safety plan, period. Because this is the thing, if you're an atheist, you're already living in the gray zone. You're out there floating around like a misfit in a world that still thinks believing in an invisible man in the sky is normal. The clock is ticking before someone decides it's time to save your soul, drag you to church, or try to exorcise the demons they think that are controlling your brain. So I want to go over how to put together a safety plan that'll keep you sane, safe, and maybe even a little smug when people realize you actually have your shit together while they're still praying for your soul. So the first step is to set boundaries or you're going to be a doormat. And you know what happens when you don't set boundaries? People walk all over you. You become a rug and they're going to wipe their feet on it. Whether you're an adult or a minor, this is your life. And we're talking about your freedom of thought here, not theirs. So, first, if you're an adult, I think the moment someone tries to talk to you about your lack of belief, you don't need to apologize. You don't need to apologize for anything. You don't owe them an explanation. I mean, try to say something like, no thanks, I'm good. No prayers, no proselytizing, no thank you, whatever. Okay. If you're a minor, it does get a little trickier. Maybe you don't want to blow up the family dinner with your "I'm an atheist" proclamation, but you're still allowed to say no. You can say things like, sorry, I'm not praying. I don't feel like it. If you have a really open family for conversations, you could say maybe next time when I'm feeling more delusional with a laugh. It depends on your family. The thing is, you don't need to be a jerk about it. Just make sure they know where you stand. And if they try to guilt trip you, don't back down. You're not going to hell for not going along with their nonsense. And you won't be a minor forever. The second step is to build a support system because you're not alone in this madness. Okay? I cannot emphasize this enough. You're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Find people who get it, whether they're other atheists, secular friends. Maybe you've got that one cool aunt who doesn't think you're lost just because you don't believe in fairy tales. It's essential to have someone in your corner, especially when things start to get uncomfortable. For adults, I really recommend finding fellow non believers, secular groups, maybe even that guy from work who doesn't pray but might still drink a beer with you and tell you to stay strong. If you're a child, you're definitely going to have to look for a trusted teacher, a counselor, maybe a friend's mom who's not trying to force you into Bible study groups. You need someone who won't try to save you every 5 minutes. The next step is you need to speak up early. Don't wait until they try to baptize you in your sleep, okay? Honestly, the best way to avoid a crisis is to not let it fester. If you're an adult, it's time to just get it over with. Have that awkward conversation early. Say you're not into the whole God thing and go on with your life. It's not fun, but it sure beats finding yourself trapped in a 20-person prayer circle at Christmas. And for kids, I mean, I get it. It's hard to throw a bombshell like that on your family, but don't let things get so bad that you're stuck in the middle of some forced intervention because they found out you think belief is for suckers. Find the quiet, strategic moment when everyone's not looking and drop the bomb like, hey, I don't believe in God. It's like ripping off a band aid. It's painful, but necessary. And don't let them tell you that you'll change your mind later. You're not some lost puppy. You're just a person who's not buying the hype. Now, if you know that your parents are going to react poorly, you're going to have to keep this under wraps until you're independent or you have enough family members on your side to back you up in these vulnerable moments so that you won't be abused. Fourth step is to document everything because you know they're going to deny it and they're going to make you look like the crazy one. And I know this sounds like you're acting like part of a crime drama, but you really do need to document everything. Every time they call you a heretic, every time they guilt trip you for being lost, keep a record, a diary. This is especially important for minors because this could mean, a journal, even if it's digital, taking screenshots of any nasty texts or threatening notes you get. Keep these emails, these texts, these pictures that call you a sinner for not believing in their magic show. One day, you're going to be glad you did, especially when they try to rewrite history and make you look like the insane one. You can't fight denial with silence. So speak up, document it, and be ready to call out the nonsense when it gets out of hand. I think number five is also very important, this step. You need to know your rights because the law doesn't care about fairy tales, all right? This is a big one. You have rights. I know it sounds like a broken record, but for both minors and adults, knowing your rights is crucial. If you're a child, you can refuse forced religious activities. You absolutely can. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you're an adult, you've got the right to refuse any religious coercion too. Whether it's forced prayers or an attempted exorcism, nobody can legally shove religion down your throat. If they retaliate by threatening to evict you out of your home or take your job, document, 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 and sue. That is exactly what Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is all about. Nobody can shove religion down your throat. Get familiar with laws in your area. If they're trying to drag you to church against your will or worse, force you into some weird religious ritual, no, you do not have to take it. My sixth recommended step is to get a bug out bag. And this is not paranoia, guys. If they're actually coming for you, this is not dramatic. This is serious. A bug out bag is basically an emergency kit that's ready to go when you need it. Abused people, in bad relationships often have like stashes of money, spare IDs, spare birth certificates stashed away. Okay. This is not just for natural disasters, but for when your family decides to go full on cult on you and you need to get the hell out of Dodge. For adults, this should be cash, ID, any important legal papers, and a few essentials. Kids, you're going to need a copy of your school records if you can find them. Mom and dad usually have at least a few report cards laying around. Keep all of your threatening emails and texts. Forward those to like a Dropbox or to your Google Drive that your parents don't know about. And then make sure you've got contact info for someone you can trust to help you get out of a bad situation. Don't be naive. If things are getting physical, you need to be ready to leave in a heartbeat. And do not think this is overkill because it's not. Sometimes people will surprise you with just how far they will go when they think they are saving your soul. Now, the seventh step is to reach out for help because you are not alone in this fight. If you're in a situation that's getting out of hand and you need your bug out bag, you're probably also going to need to call for help. I don't care if you're a kid or an adult, there are secular organizations and support groups out there waiting to step in and offer a hand. And that's whether, legal advice, emotional support, you need a place to crash when your family decides that they've had enough of your lack of belief. There's a whole network out there. Don't wait until things get dangerous. And honestly, if they've already threatened you with force or physical harm, you need to call the authorities. This is your life we're talking about, not, just family drama. Do not minimize the threat that you're living under. And that's the bottom line here. You deserve to live authentically, whether you're 16 or 36. You don't need to apologize for your beliefs or lack thereof. You don't need to endure abuse either. Guilt trips, forced conversion therapy, because someone else thinks that you should be just like them. Get the plan, set your boundaries, speak up and know your rights. And when things go south, don't be afraid to take action. You've got the tools to handle it, and if it gets really ugly, at least you'll know exactly where to go to get away from it. You're not alone in this, and you never were and never will be. Okay? Don't let them convince you otherwise. All right, that's a wrap for today. But as we close out, I just want to leave you with this. The world is full of contradictions and nonsense, especially when it comes to religion. But don't let anyone tell you there's only one way to deconstruct your beliefs. Challenge your assumptions. Break down those walls you've built around your mind, and most importantly, stay curious. Keep asking the tough questions, and for the love of reason, stop letting people pull the wool over your eyes. Until next time, stay skeptical, and remember, God kills, Satan thrills, baby. Thank you for joining me on the Ministry of Gray, where life's complexity is not a problem to solve, but a space to grow. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who you think might need it. And visit mogpodcast.com to stay connected for all the upcoming features and interviews. Remember, the gray spaces are where we find our humanity. Until next time, take care and keep seeking.